Right, I think we will get started because people joining has sort of gone down now. If anyone has any questions, as I said before, feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute at the end, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. Every time we do these sessions, I say, it's not going to be too long, I promise. And then I end up just waffling on and talking for ages. So I'm not going to promise how long it will be, but we'll keep it within the hour. Just to make sure you guys, I'm sure you've got other things to do. So today's session is on measuring and prioritizing SEO, which is super important, whether you are a business owner yourself or whether you're a studio manager, whoever has joined the webinar today, no doubt in some way you need to understand how to measure SEO success, because you're either spending your money on it or you're spending someone else's money on it. So it's a super important topic to be talking about. And if you've got marketing spend and you've got a certain amount of budget and you've decided to spend some of that budget on SEO, you need to justify that spend and why you spent it on search engine optimization versus another channel, for example. So what we are going to go through today is we're going to chat about why we need to measure SEO from my perspective, some tips on setting goals and how you set goals for SEO, and the different metrics that we can look at and track. I'm sure if you know about search engine optimization, you've probably heard quite a few different metrics that people talk about, like KPIs. So we're going to go through some of them and sort of give you a bit of information on how you might want to focus which metrics you're looking at. We're going to look at an SEO report. So what makes a good report? So whether you are the one receiving the report or whether you're the one creating a report, this should hopefully be some useful content in terms of having that report and reviewing it. A bit about how to prioritize SEO. So that links into the measurement really, is if you're measuring what you're doing and the success of it, then how do you prioritize what you need to do next? I'm going to chat about how you can build a roadmap, so an SEO roadmap in order to prioritize the work that you need to do, and then just a bit of recap on what we've gone through. Just as I said, no one else was joining, loads of people start joining as I've started. So firstly, how do we need, or why do we need to measure SEO efforts even? So we need to demonstrate the value of search engine optimization. So why are you spending money or time on your website in order to appear in Google search results? And if we can't measure and show the value of search engine optimization, then there's no point putting money into it. So again, that's to justify the budget or the time you are spending. So whether it is yourself or whether there's an agency or whether you have different people in the business that are uploading blogs to the site, for example, or people that are posting on social media in order to try and help SEO. Apologies. We need to make sure that you get buy-in and prioritization from anyone that is inputting into SEO efforts. So that's really important. And also to increase SEO spend and accelerate success. So I'm not saying that you have to spend more in SEO to see better results, but in some ways you do, because whether it's budget or whether it's time, if you don't put the time or the budget into it, you're probably not going to see results as quickly. So if you really want to see really quick results, then you might need to increase your spend, or you might need to increase the time you are spending in order to see success quicker, because as I've previously said, SEO is a longer term strategy, not a short term sort of overnight fix. So with measuring SEO, it's always important to start with the end goal in mind. So whatever the end goal is, oh, got that picture a bit too soon, whatever the end goal is of the business, so be it revenue, it's always revenue, isn't it? It's always profit, or the key metrics that you need in order to succeed. So why do you want to be visible in organic search results? So in Google, Bing, any search engine, why do you want to be there? Start with that end goal. If you try and start with, I want to be position 1 for this keyword, you're not starting with actually what is the key reason that I want to be position 1, and I think you need to work backwards to look at those key metrics. So I would always start with the end goal. It should always be related to your commercial business objectives, so whatever they are, and they usually are sales, revenue, profit. You can always, it might be that the SEO agency you're working with, so for example, Nettle, we can't make you more money from your website necessarily. So we can drive more traffic, and we can drive quality traffic by targeting the right keywords. But if you have a really bad website and it doesn't convert, or if you have a really bad product offering or service, then that isn't necessarily something we can impact. But I would always say that your SEO agency can always, consult on different things like on your website or your product offering as to why you might not be performing well. And then after you've set that own goal, you should look at the sort of additional goals within that and additional sort of benchmarks. And I'll have a look at those shortly in terms of what they might look like. And then you should make sure you're tracking your SEO metrics on a monthly basis or weekly basis. It depends how much traffic you get. If you're a big e-commerce company, like, if you're ASOS, for example, they probably have daily SEO reports or weekly. Whereas if you're quite a smaller business and your traffic isn't as high or things don't change as much, then you're likely to have monthly SEO reports. But tracking the metrics that we talk about today and the goals will ensure that you can focus your efforts and make sure that you are seeing some benefit from SEO. But obviously that benefit isn't necessarily going to be overnight. But there's different metrics that you can look at to show that you are seeing benefit. So it might not be that when you first start SEO, every month your revenue goes up, because it's going to take time for you to perform well, but there might be other metrics that are starting to go up that make you realize that you're going in the right direction in order to get to that own goal. And also it helps you keep sort of a better pulse on your site health. So if you can see that your site speed is changing or your domain score is changing, and things like that, then you can see that your sort of the work that's being done from the SEO perspective is showing some sort of improvement in your SEO optimization. Money. Just had to put that in there to reiterate that it all comes back to money, basically. So anything within SEO marketing, always relate it back to the money that you want to get from it. So we've got a few examples here of where I was speaking about the end goal. So column 1 basically has the type of company that you are. So if you were an e-commerce company, for example, your end goal for that year or your annual goal might be, I want to achieve 2,000 sales and £20,000 in revenue. So how do you achieve that end goal, and how do you then have additional sort of measures from an SEO perspective to achieve that? So you might want to say, I want to drive 100,000 visits to the website through SEO. And then through those 100,000 visits, if you were to convert 2% of those visits to a sale, then you would achieve that 2,000 online sales. And then if you wanted to achieve an average order value, so of the 2,000 sales on your website, on average, a customer spends £10, then you would achieve that £20,000 in revenue. So as you can see, I'm kind of working backwards here. The first goal is the amount of online sales and the amount of revenue that you want to achieve for the year. And then the additional measures is how SEO can play into that. So this is how much traffic I want. This is what I want the conversion rate to be. And this is what I want the average order value to be. And then there will be additional metrics within that are specific to SEO, such as, sorry, my partner's in the background and now my dog's barking. There'll be additional metrics, SEO metrics, that you can look at specifically aside from like traffic, for example. And then I won't go through each of these in too much detail, but if you're a restaurant, you may also have revenue. Then you might want to achieve a certain amount of table bookings from SEO, and then you might want to achieve them through your website or through your Google My Business page. So they can be specifically targeted to how many you want to achieve through organic search. If you're a building company, you may want to achieve £100,000 revenue from 10 clients. And if you want to do that, your website needs to drive 1,000 new business leads, and you need to convert 1% of those into 10K projects. So if you are doing SEO activity at the moment and you're not relating that back to the overall business metrics, I'd highly recommend doing that. So look at, in Google Analytics, if you have it, look at how much revenue and how much conversions are coming through organic search. Is it your best performing channel? Is it your worst performing channel? Is it improving? Is it making you money, essentially? Because if it's not making you money, then you need to work out why and you need to improve it. If you can't measure your leads from SEO back to your website. So I know sometimes people have a difficulty, like, you know, people go on your website and then they call you up. How do you track that? You need to be able to somehow track it all back to organic search. So I'd highly recommend speaking, if you have a package with us at Nettle, speaking to us if you feel like you're not really tracking it at the moment, because there will be a way to track it most of the time. So I think you need a little bit of, it might take a little bit of kind of, you know, working out, if, you know, depending on the website and depending on what the goal is, but there'll always be a goal of the website and there'll always be a way of tracking it somehow. So a couple of tips here. This all sounds a bit cliche, to be honest. Everyone's heard the smart way of setting goals, but I think a few tips here is, you know, everything within SEO, you can measure it and you can track it. So you know, whether you want to set up your own report or however you decide to track things, you should always be able to measure improvements and declines. But with that, I do want to mention SEO is a very volatile industry, and things can fluctuate on a daily basis. The amount of clients that we have come to us and say, oh, my position's 4 today, but yesterday it was 3 or 2. That does happen, and you know, your site speed might change and it might go up or down, but if you can see an incremental improvement over time, then that's what you want to show. But don't be alarmed if things change sort of on a daily or weekly basis, because that can happen. Obviously be very specific. So there's a lot of industry sort of marketing sort of jargon out there that you can just say, I want to improve my brand awareness, which is fine, that's a goal, but how are you going to measure that you've improved your brand awareness? From an SEO perspective, if you want to improve your brand awareness, I would say that in Google Search Console, which is another platform, you need to be tracking how many people are searching for your brand, and is that going up over time? If it's not, then you're probably not improving your brand awareness. So make sure that there's actually a metric next to every single goal that you set. Obviously have a time in mind. So forecast, so if you start an SEO campaign tomorrow, what is your 3-month goal? What is your 6-month goal? And, you know, 9 months in a year. And then you can always reforecast if needed. It's very difficult with algorithm updates and changes to get things exactly right in SEO. It's not as easy to forecast as some other things, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't forecast. I wouldn't let anyone tell you, oh, it's SEO, we can't forecast, or we can't try and see where we're going to be in a year's time, because if you don't have that goal, how are you ever going to know if you're closer to achieving it? You can always reforecast. I'm sure everyone forecasted their sales and their business plans, and then COVID changed it all and everyone had to reforecast, but that is just how it works. So always set a forecast. And also make sure you write down your goals, because you can always go back and then look at them as well and see if they've been achieved, or whether, and they'll keep you on the right path. I think sometimes, especially within SEO, new things can come out, you know, a new algorithm update, and we can go a bit off track. And I think you need to focus on what's important. Yes, we have to be reactive, but also you need to have some sort of plan in place and a roadmap so that you know what you're going to achieve. Now I'm going to go through some of the boring metrics that we talk about in SEO, so some of the ones that are more important and slightly less important. So everyone focuses on keyword rankings, which is fine because ultimately that's the one tangible thing that you can see. So you can always see, oh, what position am I? But how do you relate back the keyword ranking to actually what you're achieving? Because I doubt anyone sort of says, oh God, my position's changed, but then goes and looks, actually, have my sales changed, or have my other metrics changed? So I wouldn't always focus on keyword rankings, and there's a few other reasons for this. I think unless you're spending thousands of pounds more than your competitors on SEO, then you might not achieve that top position in comparison to them for a really high search volume keyword. So everyone has their competitors who they think are their business competitors. So someone that's quite similar to you, so maybe a similar size, a similar budget, so the other local business down the road. But then everyone will have organic competitors, and the organic competitors can be very different from your SEO, from your business competitors, because if you have a keyword that you want to rank for, your competitors are the people that rank for that keyword, not necessarily people who you think are your competitors. So you just need to bear in mind your budget and your time that you can spend versus who else is a competitor for organic search. So if my keyword that I wanted to rank for was Easter eggs, for example, I might have a look at who's ranking for Easter eggs, and I would see that, Tesco's, Iceland, Thornton's, Cadbury's are all up there. And I'd say, okay, I'm a very small business. How do I compete with them? So keyword is not to say you can't do well from an SEO perspective if there are, highly competitive terms and highly competitive competitors, but you just need to get your metrics right and understand what you can achieve. Also longer tail terms, so these are the terms that are, not Easter eggs, but they might be Easter eggs for diabetics is a longer tail term, and that may be a lot less competitive, and you might be able to perform a lot better with those terms than some of the very broad terms. And also your ranking, so just because you rank well, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to convert that traffic, because you could try and make your site rank well for loads of keywords, do the SEO great, and then if they get to your site in your product, or you're really not offering the right thing, then they won't convert. So it's really important to think of SEO as driving the right traffic and the right quality of traffic, because that quality of traffic will then hopefully determine whether they convert into a lead or a sale. And also, as I said before, like maintaining a top position can be very difficult. You need to be on it consistently, because also you have to bear in mind SEO isn't just about what you're doing, it's about what all the other sites are doing. So you don't know necessarily what they're doing all the time. So there's so many different things that come into play that you can't determine that. The only thing that you really can determine is the experience that people have when they get onto your site. So when you do get that traffic, are you converting them? Because a good user experience will convert people. So I'd highly recommend, whatever traffic you're getting at the moment, having a look at how much of that traffic actually ends up being someone that has called or messaged you or emailed you from your website. Because even if you're only driving 100 visits per month from SEO, if 20 or 30 of those converted to a lead, that might be enough. But if you're only converting 2 people from that, only 2 people are contacting you as a result of 100 people visiting your website, then you're not seeing the best value there. So you need to think about the experience. And then also creating evergreen content will drive incremental traffic. So this is about not necessarily targeting those top value keywords, but targeting the lower search volume keywords, or just creating great content that you're sharing on social media, that you're getting out there, that will drive incremental traffic increases, and that you will see that traffic. So optimizing for organic search isn't necessarily about being position 1 to 3 in Google. There's other ways to get traffic organically. Google My Business, you can get the traffic from social media, from the content you've created. So have a think about other ways that you can track success from SEO rather than just top keywords, top positions. So some other metrics where I've spoken about user experience, this is where engagement comes into play. So specifically, how are people behaving when they reach your site? This is what you need to look at, because no matter what volume of traffic you're getting, if that traffic just isn't performing on your site, it's really pointless. So I'd highly recommend, from an SEO perspective, looking into Google Analytics. And if you don't know how to look at the data from Google Analytics, ask someone to help you, or try and work it out using like the online learning guides and things, because if you can get these metrics and try and understand what they mean, then you can start to understand, actually, is my website providing people with the value that they need? So for example, your conversion rate, that is telling you of how many of the people that visited your website, what percentage of those people took the action that I want them to take. So if that action that you wanted them to take was to fill in a contact form, then you can see, of all these people that visited my website, this many people filled in the contact form. And if you can show that improving over time from organic search, then you can show that there's more value there. So can you see that this is actually a metric that if you improve that conversion rate of people coming to your website through SEO, then you're actually going to probably impact the bottom line more than just saying, oh, my ranking is going to increase. So I'd focus on these engagement metrics. Time on page, if someone's coming to your service or product page and they're bouncing off it straight away, they spend like 10 seconds looking at it and then go, then are you providing them with the information that they need? You have to look at this not in isolation, and you have to base it based on the situation. Because if someone has visited your website and they see your phone number straight away and they call you and then they leave the site, then they might not spend loads of time on the page. So you have to look at, have they completed this action, but they have only spent a little bit of time on the page? But if they're visiting a really long page or a really long article and they're not spending time engaging with it, then you might not be providing people with what they want. And then you can obviously look at bounce rate, how many pages did they look at when they visited the site, how far did they scroll down. So any engagement metrics are really useful to take a look at, to understand how people are behaving, how organic traffic is behaving. Remember, you can look at this from an overall perspective of your site if you want to. You don't have to filter it by organic, but the reason I would say sometimes to filter by organic is because performance will be different per channel, and sometimes your metrics can be swayed by different channels. So if you do something like display marketing, which is where you have the horrible ads that kind of pop up when you're on different websites and they follow you around, if you're doing that, the bounce rate is likely to be a lot higher than someone that's actually clicked on your website from a organic sort of advert, for example, an organic listing. So you just need to, I would always try and segment your data by channel so that you can get a better understanding of how different channels perform. So look at the engagement metrics. Got an example here of what it looks like in Google Analytics. So you've got the acquisition, which is basically the traffic, and you've got the behavior and the conversions. And where that conversions column is where basically, where it says e-commerce at the moment, you can change that. So you can scroll down on that and you can have all your different goals. So you can have like goal 1 has filled in the contact form, goal 2 has called, goal 3 has watched this video. So you can have all these different goals that you can track the success of those from different pages on your site. And then next, organic search traffic. So as I said before, handy tip is always, when you're looking at the traffic, always filter by organic so that you don't have the other channels skewing the data. But this is about how people that have specifically come from an SEO perspective to your site, how they are performing, because that's what you want to know if you're looking at search engine optimization. Look at your traffic over time. So has it changed? Has it gone down? I think if you're seeing, you know, compared to last year, or obviously COVID aside, because that's impacted everything, if you're seeing that your traffic is going down, then it's probably that your positions are worse and your visibility isn't as good. So you need to look at there, okay, why has this happened? Always be viewing things on a monthly and a yearly basis. So month on month, year on year, has my traffic improved or has it declined? And like I said, it will go up and down, but you need to see that kind of upwards trajectory somehow. Pages per visit, so you can look at that from an organic search perspective as well. The specific pages that perform well, so which pages are getting traffic and performing well. Non-branded traffic. So this is one that's actually, a lot of people don't think about it, but it is really important, because for SEO, your traffic can be going up if more people are searching for your company, and more people might be searching for your company if you're doing loads of marketing. So actually it kind of skews the organic data, because if you've done a really big campaign in an offline campaign, for example, that those people might then search for your business on Google and then come to your website, and organic will basically steal that traffic. So SEO will go, oh well, we got that traffic, but that's because someone searched for your company because of something else you're doing elsewhere. So you need to look at non-branded traffic, which is the people that have searched for a product or a service, anything that doesn't include the name of your company, because the name of your company is, you know, whilst you can include that in organic metrics, it can be skewed by other activity that you're doing. So in Google Search Console, you can specifically exclude certain words. So you can say, if my name of my company was Rightmove, I can exclude Rightmove from my traffic volume, and I can see actually for all other keywords that have excluded the name of my company, has my traffic gone up or down over time? Because that's really important. And you can look at click-through rate. So this indicates the number of people that have clicked on your result from organic search. So that's where your title and your meta descriptions come into play as to whether they've enticed people to click. So other common metrics, so these are the ones I expect people might have heard of. So domain authority, for example, that's a metric from a company called Moz that was introduced quite a long time ago. Or you've got domain rating, which is a slightly newer one, but that's from a company called Ahrefs. You have your number of backlinks. Trust and citation flow, so these scores are from a company called Majestic. These are all like SEO companies that basically come up with their own scores to help people measure if they're seeing improvements within sort of their website from an SEO perspective. And then your performance score, which could be your basically your overall website performance from like a site speed and user experience perspective, which is in something called Lighthouse. You can find a performance score in loads of different tools. So you might use like GTmetrix for site speed, but the Lighthouse one basically looks at a few different things and gives you one score. With all of these metrics, I would try avoid focusing on them, because they are vanity metrics. So Google doesn't use these metrics. The only time these metrics are probably quite useful is when you're sort of benchmarking how competitive you are against your competitors. So if you're trying to rank for a certain keyword and you can't understand why you can't rank for that keyword, what you would then potentially do is have a look at who is ranking for that keyword and understand these metrics from their site versus your site. And then you could say, so if your site has a domain authority of 10, and then you can see that all the top ranking sites have a domain authority of 50, or so, you might be like, okay, there's something here telling me that their site is potentially better than mine, and then you would dig more into it. So I never look at any of these metrics in isolation, and never use them for proper reporting, because they kind of go up and down, and they're also not necessarily indicative of your performance, but they're just quite good to use as a benchmark. And the same with backlinks. It's not about the quantity of backlinks, it's about the relevancy and quality. So if you do want to look at competitors' backlinks, to understand why, if for example their domain rating or their domain authority is a lot higher than yours, and you think that's because of backlinks, don't look at the number of backlinks, look at who they have backlinks from, because it's probably that they actually have a lot more relevant backlinks than you from certain websites. And that's where the trust and citation flow comes into play, is that the trust flow looks at how trustworthy the links that you have are, so like whether they're relevant to your website, whereas citation flow looks at like the popularity of your site. So quite a good example here is like a porn website would have really high citation flow because it's a very popular website. A lot of people are probably linking to it, but it probably has quite a low trust flow. So it's probably not a very trustworthy website. Same with like gambling sites, but they're probably quite popular. So what you need to try and make sure with this score is that your trust and citation flow, there's quite a good ratio between them, and that you don't have a citation flow score of 60 and a trust flow score of 6, because there's such a big difference there that it suggests that you have a lot of links, but none of them are that trustworthy. And Google won't necessarily see that, but it is quite a good indication that that could be the case. So you just have to look at these metrics and then look a bit closer into the detail of why those metrics are there, and then that will help you to understand them. These are all SEO tools, so Moz, Ahrefs, Majestic, and Lighthouse. There's free versions, but they do also cost money. So if you are using these metrics, just bear that in mind. And I don't think you really need to be focusing on them at all, to be honest. Tracking the metrics, so any SEO metrics that I've sort of gone through now, you can use Google Analytics or Google Search Console. They are your best friends if you have a website. You can use Google Lighthouse, and that some of the metrics from Lighthouse also goes into your Google Search Console. And you can also use Moz, Ahrefs, and Majestic. There are free versions available, and there will also be other tools out there that give you these metrics. But these are these tools that give you the metrics that I've spoken about today, which are probably some of the most popular ones. And it's worth mentioning that if you are spending time looking at these metrics, then that's fine. But if you're looking at them all in isolation and individual metrics, so you're looking at your traffic volume from Google Analytics, and you're looking at your domain rating, and then you're looking at how many conversions you have, you don't really understand what that all means until it's in a report and it all brings together a story, because really they don't really mean anything in isolation. You need to understand what they mean and why these scores are important, for example. So this is where an SEO report will come into play. A good SEO report, so it needs to be aligned to those business goals that we spoke about at the start. So I'm not saying that your report has to put in your overall company revenue or the specific goals to the company, but they need to have that goal that you had for SEO that relates back to your company goal. So if your company goal was £200,000 in revenue for 2021 and your SEO goal was £100,000 in revenue, then if you're not tracking revenue in your SEO report, then how do you know that you're performing well from an SEO perspective? So your report needs to be aligned to that goal that you set at the start. The report needs to be straight to the point, and it needs to have a commentary to summarize the performance. It depends how often you're getting the reports and if you can understand the data. So if you are the client, then you probably want a summary to understand the report. But if you are putting together the report, then it might be that you have a call or a separate summary, but somehow people need to understand what the data means, because otherwise, and some data is really easy to understand. So if you've got the revenue there and you can see it's going up, then that's quite self-explanatory. But if you do have other metrics in there that, like specific SEO metrics that people don't know what they mean, then that needs to be explained. And always follow with the commercial metrics, so the leads, revenue, sales, whatever they are, because that's ultimately what people care about. And if you follow with those, then I don't think you'll get hung up on the vanity metrics too much. Terms that are complex, so if you just put DA in a report, what does that actually mean, and why might it be important, and why might it be something that you look at? Again, those month-on-month and year-on-year changes, you might not have those if you've only just set up your Google Analytics or your platform, your reporting platform. You might not have those metrics, but you'll be able to see it over time if you keep up with your SEO work. And also not too much information in the report, because then it doesn't really make sense if you're sort of trying to understand what that report means. If you have too much or too little, then it doesn't really provide the value for you to be able to digest it and take some actions away. The question everyone asks is, how long does it take to see SEO results? Which unfortunately, I've got a really boring answer to that, but it does depend. But it depends on your budget and how much time you invest. If your budget is £1,000 a month, then you're going to get a lot more time and a lot more effort input into your site. Whereas if your budget is a lot less, then there's not going to be as much time put into it. Or if it's your own time and you're not using an agency at all, then it's how much time are you investing into it, because your time probably costs money. So if you're doing one change to your site a month, then really, do you think you're going to see SEO benefit? Probably not. So it's really thinking about how much time you invest into it and how consistent your time is. So if 1 month you do loads on your website and then the next month nothing happens, then you don't know when you're going to see results, because you're not being consistent. So this is where having an SEO project, like an ongoing campaign, comes into play, because then at least you're being consistent with everything that's changing within the industry. Also depends on the existing state of your website. So if you've got a brand new website and you've just launched that site, it's got absolutely no authority. So it's not going to be position one. It's not going to drive you, all of that revenue within a day or within a few weeks. Or if you've been given a Google penalty because you've been doing something quite manipulative, it's going to take a while to recover. Whereas if you've got a pretty good website already, you're performing quite well, but you just want to see, some improvements on what you're doing, then you might see quite quick results. Also depends on the competitiveness of your niche. So if you are, Easter eggs, for example, you're competing with the top supermarkets. Whereas if you've got a very specific customer, like I think we've got a customer that does pipe bending or something. If that's your business, then it's very niche, so it's a lot less competitive than Easter eggs. So bear that in mind when you're starting a campaign as well. And also how often search engines crawl your website, and that can be dependent on how often you update your website. So if you're never doing anything to the website, then search engines probably won't crawl the website, so they probably won't improve your position. But depending on any of the above, basically, so I can't give you a definitive answer, but I would say probably from 3 months to a year to see consistent incremental growth. But obviously, if anything happens in between that time, so if I was to spend 3 months working really hard on your website, and then you went and deleted like 20 pages, then it would probably dip again. So depends what's happening, basically. If there's a big algorithm update, and that might knock you off a bit, but ultimately, if you're working on your website, you should be preempting what these updates are going to be and hopefully doing everything in the right way, that the update won't necessarily impact you massively. So if you need to give someone an answer, or you want an answer for yourself, probably 6 months would be like a good answer, I would say. It is a marathon SEO, it's not a sprint, it should be ongoing. So it's not a piece of activity, it's not something that you just do over 3 months and then say, oh, it's done now, we've done that project, because you're not going to see consistent growth. So if all you want to do is just have a website and, you know, make sure your website has some keywords on it and that it's, you know, performs well and it's, you know, got good site speed, then you can do a 3-month campaign. But that's only going to last so long. You might have good site health and good rankings, but a month or 2 later, when you stop working on it, it's probably going to go down again. So you have to look at the longer term view. If you want to invest in SEO, do not think it's just going to be a 3-month piece of activity. But that's not to say if you don't see results in 6 months to a year, or you don't feel like you're getting any benefit from it, that's not to say you shouldn't stop it and, you know, change what you're doing. You have to see results, but it's not going to happen overnight. So if you feel like you haven't seen results over 3 months, then try and look at some of the other SEO metrics that might show that you have seen results. So you might not be position 1, but has your quality score improved, and has these other scores improved? Because it might be that if we can see that these are improved, it might be that it just hasn't hit the ranking side of things yet. So there's always a metric that you can look at to see if it's improved on a monthly basis, just because your overall like end goals haven't necessarily improved straight away. Then finally, I think this is the final thing, we're going to talk about sort of prioritizing SEO and setting a roadmap. But I would always start with prioritizing the activity that requires the least amount of time or resource or budget, but has the most impact. Because then you can essentially show from this little we've spent, or from this little time we've spent on it, this is the impact it's had. Actually, if we had way more budget, or if we had way more time, imagine what we could be doing. And then that helps to prioritize and get buy-in. If you do have different people in the business or different people that you have to report to, they might, you know, there might be people that have resistance. So if you can demonstrate early returns by, you know, working on the activity that doesn't require loads of input or buy-in from different people, then I would focus on those first. The general priority order here for SEO, bearing in mind you do have to assess each site on a case-by-case basis. So if one website already has great content when you start working on it, but from a technical perspective it's really bad, then you probably need to prioritize technical first. But if you're starting on an SEO campaign tomorrow, or you're starting to optimize your website tomorrow, and it's a brand new site or a really low quality site, I'd always start with content. Content is the most important element and backbone of SEO. And by content, I don't just mean your blog articles. Content is every single word that you have on your website, every single CTA, your homepage, your About Us page, anything on your website is content. Blogs and articles are just one element of content. Crawlability, so next we'd look at the technical side of SEO basically. So can search engines find your site and your pages? Is your site in a good technical health? That means it will be found by search engines quite easily, because if they can't find your content, then it's kind of pointless. Low quality pages, so then I'd look at, is there anything that's bringing the quality of your site down? Don't be afraid to remove low quality content from your site, as long as it's redirected or even update it to make it better. Then focus on user experience, because, you know, you have to have the right content, you have to be able to get people to your site in order to then show them that you have a good user experience and you can convert those people. So looking back at the initial metrics that I mentioned tracking, that's where user experience comes into play, is that actually once they get onto your site, what are they doing? And are they having a good experience, or do you just have a really bad website that you've got the right content on the website, but it's just not designed in a nice way and people are just leaving the site or not performing the action that you need. And then trust signals. So we've done quite a few webinars before about trust, reputation, reviews. All of that's super important, and it's becoming way more important within SEO as well. So I would focus on looking at your trust signals. Once you've got all of the above right, do you have the right trust signals going to your website? Do you have backlinks from the right websites? So not just do you have backlinks, do you have backlinks from relevant websites, and do you have a good reputation? Do you have the right reviews? All of that needs to be done before you look at the rest of it. So don't just come to us and go, build me backlinks, because you're not going to get backlinks if you don't have very good content. And even if you get the backlinks, if people can't find your site because of crawlability issues, then those backlinks are going to mean nothing because you're not going to be in the search results. So I would focus on trying to do it in this order. But if you want, it might be worth having sort of a mini audit to work out where you are sitting with regards to all of these elements, because it might be that your content is already great, it's just your user experience that isn't very good. And then prioritizing specific activity. So I would start with prioritizing anything urgent. So like we said before, if you've got really bad content, if your site is not indexed and it can't be found in Google, if there's core issues that are urgent and they're clearly holding your performance back, they need to be focused on first. And then next, I'd look at the quick wins. But don't focus too much on quick wins, because sometimes people can have a list of quick wins that actually ends up taking 4 months, and by that time they haven't actually impacted the site because they've just done all these quick wins and haven't done anything that's going to have a high impact. So once you've done a few quick wins, that could be your page titles, your meta descriptions, they're all quite quick to do, then focus on the high impact, high effort stuff. And this is where us at SEO at Nettle, we can't do everything for you, because a lot of this is, requires business involvement in terms of what you have on your website. So we can update your page titles, we can optimize your site, and we can provide you with recommendations. But if you're not willing to change the website significantly in order to see, a big impact, then the results you're going to see are only going to go so far. So there'll probably be recommendations that will say, you need to change this whole page. It needs to be completely rewritten, needs to be completely redesigned in order to perform better. That is a high impact, but a high effort piece of activity. But wouldn't you prefer to do that and see results than carry on with these quick wins for months on end and not see any impact? And then obviously the final things that you can look at is the things that do have an impact and they're not very high in effort, and you can generally just do them on a monthly basis. But when you're first starting on an SEO project or campaign, always have a look at the urgent issues, look at what's going to have the biggest impact, and then look at the quickest wins and try and prioritize those 3 things within the time that you have available and how you spend time on each of those. Build a roadmap. So always have a live roadmap within SEO. So this is basically, the activity that you're going to do. Yes, it can be reactive. So if something happens or if you decide you need to change what you're doing, then that's fine. The roadmap can be updated, but based on an initial look at the site or initial understanding of SEO, you should be able to have a roadmap. So where do we start with SEO? Well, we start with keyword research, and then we start with a content audit in order to understand, actually, is this site targeting the keywords that it needs? So there should always be some sort of roadmap. And we have one at Nettle that we follow. We obviously change it based on the site and what needs to be done and the priorities, but always try and set some sort of roadmap. And in that roadmap, you can track your activity, because that can help you understand where you might have gone wrong or where you've done something that's had a massive impact. If you've updated loads of pages and then a couple of months later you see your rankings have spiked, your traffic and your revenues really improved, then you might be able to track that back to a specific piece of activity you did. Or if you've done something that was a little bit risky and everything's dropped, then there may be a reason for that, and you can have a look at your roadmap to understand that. Roadmap is actually really easy. It sounds like, oh, SEO roadmap, how do you put that together? But it's just a Gantt chart of just the stuff you're doing. It's just a chart with a list of activity and the week or the date that you're doing it, basically. And that will help you keep track of what you're doing. So I would always, in your roadmap, have like what's in the pipeline, what's in progress, what's going to be completed, and what's in the backlog, and try and like split that out by like colors, for example, so that you can track where you are. And always indicate the changes that indicate the date that specific changes were made, because that will help you link it back to performance. Include the resource required, so who needs to be in that. So if you need support from anyone for it, because then you can sort of engage those people quite early on rather than telling them last minute that you need help with something. And keep that priority column there, because often people forget about the priorities because you want to go and do the easiest piece of activity first, when actually the priority, the biggest priority piece of activity might be really hard to do, but if you do that, you're going to see the performance improve. Whereas if you carry on doing that real low priority stuff, then it's highly unlikely that you're going to see those improvements. So build a roadmap, keep updating that roadmap, and then you can track everything that you're doing. And if you split the roadmap by week or by month, however often you're doing activity, then it can actually help you see and look back. So if you say, oh, I've been doing SEO for 6 months and I have not seen any improvement, and then you look back at your roadmap and realize you only did 2 things that you said you were going to do, there's probably a reason that you haven't seen improvement, because you haven't done much. But if you've done loads and then you look back and all that stuff you did was just those quick wins and none of that high impact work, then that's probably where you're going wrong. Obviously SEO is always changing, algorithm updates, what your competitors are doing, so your roadmap will be changing, but you should always set one at the start so that you can keep track of what you're doing. So pretty much on time. No time for questions, but we'll do the questions anyway. I won't go through this, but essentially the key takeaways are, obviously we need to track and report SEO. We need reports to explain the data. Don't focus on the vanity metrics. Remember, it's a long-term strategy, and make sure you learn to prioritize and use a roadmap to help you keep track and stay focused. Thank you. Right, I'm just going to have a look to see if there are any questions. Right. How will we know when algorithms change so we can react to it? So if you keep up to date on what websites are saying, so there's quite a few SEO websites out there, Search Engine Land, all these different websites. If you keep up to date on what they're saying is important within SEO, then hopefully you should be able to preempt what algorithm updates are, or Google will tell you. So if you were to Google after this meeting, what's important for ranking in SEO in 2021, not 2018, because that's old. If you were to search 2021, how do I rank? Have a look there, write everything down, try and have a look, because all these websites out there, they've done all their research, they know what's important, so understand what is important. And then ideally, you shouldn't have to always react to algorithm changes. So there's an algorithm update that Google told us about last year, coming in May this year, which is around user experience and site speed. So your site should already be optimized for that, and you should be working on it now rather than after it's happened. The algorithm updates, they can sometimes be a bit of a shock, but usually you can hopefully know the kind of way it's going. Like I can tell you now, Google is going the route of user experience on your website, trust signals, reputation, all of that is going to be super important. So focus on that. A Google penalty, you will know if your site has one as long as you have Google Search Console set up. So a Google penalty is where Google has manually looked at your site and said you're doing something wrong. So either your site has a big security issue, or you've been buying loads of backlinks and Google can see that something you're doing is really manipulative. So you will know if you've had a Google penalty as long as you've got Google Search Console set up, and you would get a notification. They're quite rare, unless you're doing something really bad. You probably won't get one, so I wouldn't worry too much. But the other type of penalty you can get is obviously an algorithmic penalty. So that's when there is an algorithm update, your rankings can drop, and that's because for some reason your site doesn't fit with the new algorithm rules, basically. And that doesn't always take as long to recover from, but it depends what it is. So if you do see a big drop in your traffic, then find out why that is. It could have been because of an algorithm update, and then you may need to have a look at how you recover from that update. Should I focus on my website or Facebook company page? It depends. Where do you get your most business? So that is what's really important to me, is actually it's going back to those end goals. I've got quite a few friends that are hairdressers and beauticians. All of their business comes through Facebook and Instagram, so they don't have websites and they don't need them. It's about where you will get the most of your business. But if you are a hairdresser and you do wedding hair, and a lot of that comes through organic searches, then you might need to optimize your website. So focus it back to where you're going to see the most value, and then decide what you need to do. Also, don't forget that you can actually optimize a Facebook page from a SEO perspective. So Facebook is also a search engine. People do search for things in Facebook, so you can have a look at that. But yeah, if you think people are going to find you through Google, then optimize your website and your Google My Business page. How do you think, if anyone does need to go, by the way, I won't be offended if you drop off, but I'll just carry on answering the questions. How do you think using keywords for SEO differs from Google Ads keywords for boosting search rankings? Are there big benefits from either options? So keywords are important for both. They're both important in, I suppose, different aspects. So from an SEO perspective and from a PPC perspective, keywords can be competitive. So like a keyword like Easter eggs, as I mentioned earlier, is hard from an SEO perspective, but will also be hard from a PPC perspective, because you'll have all the bigger brands also bidding on that term from PPC. So they're both difficult. The thing with PPC is that it can be easier to sort of, I suppose, the more money you put into it, the more likely you might be able to perform for that keyword. So if you've got loads of money, and you do need a good landing page as well, by the way. You can't just spend 100 grand on Easter eggs and perform well from PPC. You have to have the right content as well. So that's kind of where it slightly differs. But whatever you're doing from an SEO perspective should also help from a PPC perspective. But keywords are important for both ads and SEO. But they're a little bit more important from SEO perspective in terms of actually your whole website. So from paid, all Google really looks at necessarily from page. The key thing is making sure that the page that you're trying to take people for that keyword is optimized. Whereas SEO, there's so much more to look at. So there's over like 200 ranking factors, whereas there's not as many within page. You can kind of more understand quite easily where you're going wrong. Backlinks are, so we've got a question here about what are backlinks. Backlinks are the number of people or the number of other websites linking to your website, or even the number of shares that you have, for example. They almost count as a backlink. So the number of people that are basically giving a vote of confidence to your website. you can find out your backlinks. Are they the same as hyperlinks? Yes. Yes, basically. But obviously, if you have a hyperlink in your own website that goes to your own website, that's not a backlink. That's just an internal link. But if on your website you link to another company's website, you're giving them a backlink, basically. Tip: can't be a good editor going through the page text before loading on a site. Absolutely. If you're loading things onto your site that have spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, all of that is bad for SEO if it doesn't read well. So your content needs to read well. You need to have short sentences, short paragraphs. Have a look at, have a look online how to make content readable for SEO, for example. It's not just about optimizing for keywords, it's about optimizing for readability. An advantage, what is an advantage to running your roadmap as a Gantt chart versus a more agile backlog? I would do either, actually. Good question. I think an agile backlog is good as well, as long as you're actually working on each of those things. I think the advantage to having it as more of a project at the start is you can kind of prioritize them all and see where things fit, and then you can also have that agile approach. So I think whatever works best for you, but just make sure that you're prioritizing by SEO impact rather than what you think is important, because it's about what's important for SEO. If you could have only one tool or app to help with SEO, which would it be, free or paid? I would say Ahrefs. So that's a paid tool, really useful. So really useful for keyword research, really useful for like competitor analysis. So there's a content explorer option in there, really good for rank tracking. It doesn't cost too much money if you've just got like one site on there. So it increases for the number of websites and the number of users and things. But I would go with Ahrefs, or SEMrush is also really useful. All the free tools are great, but if you pay money, you get more options, basically. Best tools to learn Google Search Console effectively. Does Nettle offer anything on this? We don't have a specific like training on Search Console, but that is a useful topic to consider actually for the future, because we always talk about Search Console and analytics. Google does have their own training on it. I don't know a specific course, but I would highly recommend having a look at YouTube tutorials, and then also potentially there is a website called lynda.com that has a lot of online training. Have a look at that website and see if they have specific tutorials on Google Search Console. All you need to do is learn the basics initially, and then you'll work your way around it the more you do it. How can you use Google Analytics retrospectively? If you set up in January, is it possible to see results from December? Does Google have the figures for a site even though you don't? No. So if you've set up your your analytics in January, Google won't be able to show you metrics any earlier than that, unfortunately. So that's why I'm telling you to set it up as soon as possible, so that you can start tracking the results over time. The one thing you can do is in that tool called Ahrefs that I showed you, you can put in a website, and based on the website's like sort of ranking positions and performance, it gives you an estimate organic traffic each month and an estimate revenue, for example. So that could be quite useful. But yes, you have to set these tracking tools up in order to be able to have the metrics. PPC, what is PPC? PPC is pay per click. So that's where when someone searches in Google or any other search engine, when they see an advert at the top, that's what PPC is. It means that they've paid for that advert, basically. Was that Ahrefs and SEMrush? Yes. They're both actually quite easy, but you probably just need to understand the basics of what's offered in there. So they have like Ahrefs has a rank tracker, which is rankings, tracking your rankings. You have to add keywords in order to track them. It has a content explorer where you can put a URL in, it can give you loads of information on that. So you can learn these things just by trialing it. So there probably is a free trial with Ahrefs. So I feel like I'm promoting them here. I should probably get some money for this. But yeah, have a look and see if there's a free trial that you can just have a play around with it and see if it's useful. I find it really useful, but you might need to spend more than the 7 days free trial, for example, to really get value out of it, because if you don't know how to use it straight away, until you start learning all the different things that you can do, you might not know how to use it properly within 7 days, but do as much as you can. Ahrefs also have lots of online training to use their tools. So most companies that have a tool will have training to use their tool. So have a look at Ahrefs. I think it's called Ahrefs Academy, and they'll have training if you want to have a go with that tool. I think that's all of the questions, unless there are any final ones. But as usual, I've gone over time, so I will let everyone go. But if you do have any questions, feel free to email me at SEO@nettle.com. There we go. We've got the link to the Ahrefs Academy there. So if anyone wants to take that and have a look, then please do and have a go. Thank you.